Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would give a career review of one of my favorite fighters to watch, and that is Mr. Anthony Joshua. For those of you guys overall that don't know, I love watching Anthony Joshua. I once upon a time said that Anthony Joshua was going to become the best heavyweight in the world, and you can debate that he is one of the two options for the best heavyweight in the world today. Now, I think that the two best heavyweights in the world today are two British fighters, and I don't think that there'd be much dispute about that, except from the Americans and the Deontay Wilder fanboys. But it is what it is. Anyways, I wanted to do this on BoxingRec.com, but for whatever reason, man, I can never seem to have good luck with BoxingRec.com, so I'm just gonna review it here. We're going to take a look at Anthony Joshua's career, and I'm going to tell you the first time I saw Anthony Joshua and why I was so impressed with him from so early on, when it comes down to the overall. And I'm going to tell you about the fights that I've seen and overall what I thought about them. So we're just going to give a career review because I thought it would be an interesting video to do. So the story begins when I seen Anthony Joshua. It begins with a website known as Boxing News 24. And for those of you that know that website, you know that they're a very biased media site when it comes down to the overall. The writers there are extremely biased, and to be quite honest with you, I think they do that on purpose just to get views and a certain amount of other things. But the first fight that I ever heard about Anthony Joshua in was the upcoming Kevin Johnson fight. And I think there was some weird thing where they like checked Anthony Joshua's pulse or something to see if he was nervous or something like that. Now maybe like a similar Sonny Liston Muhammad Ali thing. Now maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know, but I remember this is the first fight that I remember Anthony Joshua in, and I remember I was like, who's this Anthony Joshua character? Who is this guy? Because I had never heard of him. I remember this is only my and for the people that don't know, this is only like my second year. Getting into current day boxing. I had, watched boxing ever since 2012, so I've been into it for about a good 7 or 8 years. But when it comes down to the overall, I was only watching older boxers. I was watching Mike Tyson. I was watching Muhammad Ali. I was watching Sugar Ray Leonard, Roy Jones Jr. It wasn't until really about 2013, and definitely 2014 that I was finally starting getting into current age boxing, where I would watch Floyd Mayweather, Deontay Wilder, Vladimir Klitschko, people of that caliber, Manny Pacquiao, Miguel Cotto, people of that sort of caliber, when it came down to it. So, the heavyweight division was pretty big because Vladimir Klitschko at the time was number 2 pound for pound. Well, I won't say that it was pretty big, but the reason why, the heavyweight division is always going to be big in boxing, and the heavyweights are always going to attract a lot of attention, especially, the American and British heavyweights. And Vladimir Klitschko was the number 2 pound for pound fighter at the time, from what I remember, when it came down to right behind Floyd Mayweather. From what I remember, maybe I'm wrong about that. I can't remember. I believe he was at least within the top 3. But when it came down to it, so I remember that I did not think the heavyweight division was all that popular at the time. So Deontay Wilder had kind of showed up, I believe, in 2015, and he had defeated Bermane Stiverne, and I thought it was a very impressive performance. And Deontay Wilder at that time, a lot of people probably think that I hate Deontay Wilder, but I actually thought Deontay Wilder was going to be the next up-and-coming heavyweight unified champion, is what I thought was going to happen, at least once Klitschko retired, because he was getting up there in age a little bit. But when it came down to the overall, then this Anthony Joshua character came out of the woodwork. And I said, whoa, who's this guy? Because the reason why I was impressed with Deontay Wilder is because Wilder seemed to have a great amount of power. He seemed overall to have a decent reach, decent, athleticism. And then I looked at Anthony Joshua and I said, wow, this dude might even be better than Deontay Wilder. And the first fight that I seen him in was against Kevin Johnson. And this fight only lasted 2 rounds. Now, Kevin Johnson has never really been that elite of a fighter. But when you take a look at Kevin Johnson's record, Kevin Johnson has been a similar opponent overall of some pretty decent fighters, and he was not knocked out against them. Philip, this guy, he's pretty new on the scene, but not knocked out against Philip, not knocked out against Daniel Dubois, not knocked out against Andrew Ruiz Jr., and this is only a couple years ago, folks. This is this is not that long ago. In 2017, he was not knocked out by Kubrat Pulev. He was not knocked out by Derek Chisora, not knocked out by Christian Hammer, not knocked out by Tyson Fury. And also, he was not knocked out by Vitaly Klitschko. That's how many great boxers this man has fought. And the only one he was knocked out against all these great boxers. Now, of course, you've seen he got knocked up by Peter Malas there, but I don't really know overall who that is. But it's so impressive that he was able to stay in the ring with all these guys. But you know who he got destroyed against was Anthony Joshua. He got destroyed by Anthony Joshua. So when I took a look at the record and I said, wow, this dude faced Tyson Fury, this dude faced Derek Chisora, this dude faced Vitaly Klitschko, and the only one out of all those fighters that was able to not just knock him out, but destroy him was Anthony Joshua. So immediately from the beginning, I was very impressed with Anthony Joshua. I thought that he was very talented. I said, this dude might even have more power than Deontay Wilder. Now, looking at it now, do I believe Deontay Wilder most likely has a little bit more power in his right hand? Yes. But Anthony Joshua still is a very good, power puncher. Make no mistake about it. A lot of people forget what type of power he has. So, the next fight that I see him in, and this is another one that I did not see live, but I remember Gary Cornish. Gary Cornish was this undefeated fighter. I think he was like 20-something and 0 when he fought Anthony Joshua. Let's take a look. Like 21 and 0 or something like that. Let's say that's exactly what he was. He was 21 and 0. And Anthony Joshua knocks him out in the first round. Now, Gary Cornish by no means is an elite fighter. I mean, we can sit here and argue that he was 21 and 0 and all this other stuff. Let's not beat around the bush. Gary Cornish is not Gary Cornish is not an elite fighter. All right, it is what it is. But the fact that Anthony Joshua was able to knock him out in round 1, I said, okay, wow, this dude is a unit, as many people overall, would like to say. When it comes down, I said, this dude overall is going to destroy people. This guy overall is going to become the best heavyweight in the world. He's even going to take over Vladimir Klitschko. That's what I was saying at the time. And then you have this next fight, which was the biggest fight up to this point in his career, obviously. And Dillian Whyte, when I took a look at Dillian Whyte, I wasn't overly impressed with him. Now, I do think Dillian Whyte has improved over the years. But when I took a look at Dillian Whyte here, I said, just looks like another slugger to me. Has decent power, but I'm not really overly impressed with this guy. And this is yet again another fight that I could not see live. Because at this time, I don't think they were showing his fights on Showtime. I think they were showing it on Sky Sports, which unfortunately I couldn't watch at the time. But it is what it is. But Dillian Whyte, when it came down to it, he was undefeated at the time. I believe when it came down to it. And let me see if he had any decent wins. Probably not any A-class wins or anything like that, obviously, because he was also starting his career as well. But let's see if I recognize anyone. So, I'm not seeing anyone that I really recognize. But the bottom line is this. Both of them were undefeated. They were both upcoming prospects. Anthony Joshua obviously was the favorite in that fight. But, and we all know what Dillian Whyte has eventually came later on to do. That's why I count that as an A-class win. But when it comes down to the overall, so this was really the first elite win of Anthony Joshua's career, and it turned out to be a very great win because look at where Dillian Whyte is now. He's a very, very good to borderline great heavyweight. And I remember this fight. I remember watching it. I was so excited to watch this full fight. I predicted that Anthony Joshua was going to knock this dude out within 4 rounds. I remember how cocky Dillian Whyte was. I remember him saying all sorts of stuff. Him saying, like, I just hate Anthony Joshua. He's such a scumbag. You guys remember that? When they sat down? I also remember, that there was, like, some hits after the bell. And I think Anthony Joshua, maybe just hit him right after the bell or something like that on accident. And I do believe it was an accident. And Dillian Whyte literally went in the corner and tried to overhand right Anthony Joshua. I remember that. It was crazy. He was completely out of control in that fight. And in the second round, Anthony, and I was watching this fight. You know how they have those updated live scorecards online? You know how you can see it? That's how I was watching this fight. Once again, I couldn't see this fight live when it was happening in the moment. And I was just like, well, that's a little bit weird. Anthony Joshua should have knocked this guy out by now. Well, it turns out Dillian Whyte was giving him a little bit of a tougher fight than I thought. Now, when I watched the fight, I still think Anthony Joshua was winning the majority of the fight. I don't think Dillian Whyte was really seizing the day a lot of the times against Anthony Joshua or anything, but he was able to stun him. He was able to hurt him with a good left hook in the second round, that was able to stun Anthony Joshua, and Anthony Joshua was hurt for, a few seconds. But I was impressed with Anthony Joshua because overall he was able to take that shot. He was able to basically come back from that, and he was able to recover within seconds. So I thought he recovered from it pretty well. There was always a bunch of people, especially from the amateurs. I thought Anthony Joshua was very chinny. I had never seen it, really up to that point. And I think calling Anthony Joshua chinny, I think that might be going a little bit too far. What I'll say is that I think Anthony Joshua has an average chin. I'll say an average chin because calling him chinny I don't think is fair. And the reason why I say that is because not only can Dillian White hit very hard, but a certain amount of these other guys that he's fought, can hit very hard as well. And the fact that he got hit by them, and took some of those shots, shows you that Anthony, he is not just some, Amir Khan. So it is what it is. But anyway, so I remember this. Anthony Joshua starts getting a little bit more into the fight. When I remember the fight, 6th round, Anthony Joshua, I believe, is starting to get more into it. The 7th round is when the knockout happens, as it says right here, TKO. And Anthony lands this beautiful right hook that lands on Dillian White's, that lands on the top of his head. And Dillian White immediately has this crazy reaction. He immediately overall does this stumbling dance type of movement, and he goes to the ropes. And I remember Anthony Joshua realizes that, okay, I have him now. And, overall, Anthony Joshua basically goes towards him. And then overall, eventually we all know that famous uppercut. If you've seen it, bam, whops him with that wicked right uppercut. And Dillian White's eyes are just phased out. He's not getting back up. So I was a bit surprised that it took Anthony Joshua that long to knock out Dillian White because I didn't think Dillian White was going to be that good of a fighter. Now, in time, we know that he ended up being a very decent fighter, but at the time, I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. Maybe Anthony Joshua, needs to work on some things. He did get stunned in this fight. I thought he was going to knock him out earlier. Let's see what happens. Well, next fight, and this is his first title fight. This is for the IBF heavyweight title. Now, Charles Martin ended up winning his title because, and I remember this fight happened on HBO, the fighter that he fought ended up hurting his knee, like breaking his knee or tearing his ACL in the middle of the fight. Yeah, Glazkov. That was the guy's name. And that's how he won the vacant IBF title. So that's what happened at the time. And this was a dude overall, that was said in the lead-ups. I always love those lead-ups to the fights where they sit down with each other. And Charles Martin was just out of this world arrogance. And listen, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. This dude overall was like, I walk around, this world like I'm a god. I'm going to knock you out and I'm going to step right over you. And, in the first round, this is one of those fights where I was really impressed with Anthony Joshua because he completely decimated Charles Martin. Now, come to think of it, Charles Martin is not really, once again, Charles Martin, I can sit here and bullshit you all I want to. Well, he was the IBF champion. He was considerably top 10 by Ring Magazine and everyone else. He had the belt and all that stuff. Charles Martin is not an elite fighter. There's a reason why, even though he's not that old, he's not in the top 10 today. He's probably top 20. But when it comes down to the overall, he's not necessarily a top 10 fighter. He was top 10 then because the heavyweight division is much more talented now than it was back then, but it is what it is. Anyways, what I was impressed with Anthony Joshua in this fight was his counterpunching ability. And I think a lot of people actually underestimate Anthony Joshua's counterpunching ability because I remember this fight. And Charles Martin overall, he's a southpaw from what I remember. He would overextend his jab, though, actually. And I think he tried to throw a left cross, and then Anthony Joshua would dip down to the left, and then overall he'd come back up with the right cross straight to the face. And that right hand just completely just whacked Charles Martin right in the face. And in the second round, you could tell immediately, the first time Charles Martin was knocked down, all that, I walk this earth like a god shit, all that shit just came, just flew out the window when it came down to the overall. And you could tell immediately this dude was like, wow, this guy can really, really, really hit. And I remember the second knockdown happened overall. Anthony Joshua knocked him down again. The same exact punch, didn't see it coming. And Charles Martin can act like he didn't quit in that fight. He quit in that fight. And a certain amount of people overall, may not agree with that. He quit in that fight. I remember a lot of people saying that Anthony Joshua quit in the Andy Ruiz fight. I think an example of quitting is when Charles Martin quit in the Anthony Joshua fight. Because, one of those situations where, they're getting their ass whooped or they get hit by a power puncher and they don't want to get hit again. And they kind of wait till the 10 count goes and then they get back up and they're like, oh no, well, what are you talking about? I didn't get counted out. That's exactly what Charles Martin did. So it is what it is. I remember that fight. Oh, dropped my phone there for a minute. Sorry about that. Anyways, I remember that fight. And I was very impressed with Anthony Joshua's counterpunching ability. And this is when I was really starting to see, and I said, wow, okay, this dude is really starting to be something. This dude is going to become the best heavyweight in the world. 16-0, already has his first belt. This guy's going to go on a rampage. And then here comes his next fight against Dominic Breazeale. And Dominic Breazeale was undefeated at the time. And once again, I can feed you all this, bullshit of Dominic Breazeale was undefeated at the time and he was this elite, fighter. Dominic Breazeale, once again, another guy to where sure he might have been undefeated at the time. And he might have even been ranked in the top 10 by Ring Magazine at the time. Dominic Breazeale is not an elite fighter. You compare him to the heavyweights of today, there's a reason why he's not in the top 10. All right, overall, it is what it is. But I remember this fight. And this is really the first fight where I think a certain amount of people realized that Anthony Joshua might have stamina issues. Anthony Joshua is a type of fighter to where back then, and maybe even still a little bit today, but ever since the Ruiz loss, of course, he's changed things up. And we'll get into that. But since this fight lasted 7 rounds, what you notice about Anthony Joshua in this fight is that, he seems very decent for the first 4 rounds. Maybe even for the first 5. But when that, 6 and 7 round hits, he starts to run out of steam a little bit. And I remember Anthony Joshua having a little bit of a bloody nose in this fight because Dominic, he's a big guy. He weighs a lot overall when it comes down to it. He's around Anthony Joshua's same physical dimensions. And that's also a thing I need to say about Anthony Joshua. Anthony has never really had the problems with the big guys. He's never really had the same problems with the big guys, like people his own size, that he has with the small guys. I think that's important to mention because the main ones that he has problems with are the people that are the speedier, overall, smaller guys. Those are the people that he has problems with. Not saying that he hasn't had problems with some of the bigger guys, as we're going to in his 19th fight, we all know what happened there. But, it is what it is. Anyways, but when it comes down to the overall, Dominic Breazeale, he's mainly getting outboxed in this fight, but he has given Anthony Joshua, a little bit of fight. He's jabbing him in the face. It's causing Anthony Joshua's nose to bleed a little bit. But then the 7th round comes. I can't remember exactly what he hits Breazeale with, but he just starts pummeling him. He just starts pummeling him. I think he hits him with a right cross. Maybe I'm wrong. But he hits him with the right cross, backs Breazeale up, and Anthony Joshua just beats the tar out of him in the corner. Fight's over. And that was when I was just like, okay, Anthony Joshua's obviously a very great fighter, but he's got some things to work on. He really has to, move his head around a little bit more. He has to work on that conditioning. And I think everyone's seen that a little bit of a, if you know what you're watching, you've seen that vulnerability in this fight. That's when you first seen it, when it came down to the overall, especially the stamina issue. But, it is what it is. But moving on to his next fight, I don't think he captured a second title yet, but let's see overall. So anyway, his next fight is against Eric Molina. And the reason why a lot of people were intrigued by this fight is because Eric Molina was a past opponent of Deontay Wilder. And I know a certain amount of people, what's interesting is that a certain amount of the Deontay Wilder fan base said that, oh, he's just fighting Deontay Wilder leftovers. But when Deontay Wilder fought Dominic Breazeale, no one said that he was fighting Anthony Joshua leftovers. So it is what it is. But when it comes down to it, either way, it was very interesting because it's always interesting when you have 2 people in the same division that look like very top tier fighters and they fight a similar opponent. Because of course people are going to judge that and they're going to say, okay, who has a better performance because who's going to be the better fighter? Well, Anthony Joshua completely decimates Eric Molina within 3 rounds. And I remember him pinning Eric Molina up against the ropes and just lands this hell of a right cross. Just full extension, completely overall, just snaps Eric Molina's head back. Couldn't get back up from the punch. And it was a hell of a punch. I knew he wasn't getting back up. Anthony Joshua was looking like the Terminator in overall these series of fights. And I said, when this Anthony Joshua Deontay Wilder fight happens, I think that Anthony Joshua is going to knock him out completely. And I think Deontay Wilder is going to get knocked out within the first 6 rounds. That's what I was thinking. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who was thinking that. Keep in mind I was a lot younger here then. when it comes down to it. And that could still happen now. We don't know. But when it comes down to it, I think a lot of people think that that fight's a lot more closer now that you really have really seen them in their whole careers now. Or not whole careers, but, their careers progress a little bit more. But then this next fight was for sure going to be the biggest fight of his career. And you can debate has been the biggest fight of his career today. It was against Vladimir Klitschko. Now, what's interesting to me is that a certain amount of the Deontay Wilder fans especially say, oh, he fought an old man. He was 41 years old and all this other stuff. But yeah, when Deontay Wilder fought Luis Ortiz, when actually, from what I hear, we don't even know his actual age. There was no excuses there. He gets full credit for that. And people love to say that Vladimir Klitschko came off of a loss. That is true. He did come off of a loss. He was older here, and he did have a year layoff. But I always like to say this. You can tell what point a fighter is in their career with the fight that they put on. And Vladimir Klitschko put on the fight of his life in this fight. Vladimir Klitschko was at a very good point in his career. So I give Anthony Joshua full credit for defeating Vladimir Klitschko. And when it comes down to the overall, I remember this fight very clearly. Anthony Joshua, I predicted him to win the fight, even though I knew that this was a 50-50 fight. And Vladimir Klitschko, he was coming off of a loss to Tyson Fury, but it's not like it was one of those devastating losses that, Kell Brook would have suffered, maybe to Errol Spence Jr., that would have never made him the same fighter ever again. Vladimir Klitschko lost by decision. He lost by dominant decision. But when it comes down to the overall, he still only lost by decision. It's not like he got majorly hurt in that fight. In this fight, he got knocked out. When it comes down to it, I remember this fight pretty clearly. This was probably the best heavyweight fight. Now, a certain amount of people might say, well, what's wrong with you? Isn't that Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder? One, in my opinion, no, it's not. Because in my opinion, Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, that should have not been a draw. I thought it should have been a very clear win for Tyson Fury. And besides the knockdown rounds that Deontay Wilder won, I didn't really think that fight was really overly entertaining. This fight was entertaining every second of the fight. Anthony Joshua was outboxing him, or maybe not every second of the fight, but the majority of the fight. The first 3 rounds, I remember Anthony Joshua outboxing Vladimir Klitschko. Pretty much what I expected. Vladimir Klitschko, it did look like he was throwing more. You could tell this was a Vladimir Klitschko that was very focused. He wanted to come back. He wanted to win his belts back. He wanted to overall, become the heavyweight world champion once again. He came very prepared for this fight. This was a Vladimir Klitschko that to me looked much more prepared for an opponent of his physical proportions than overall, he did with the Tyson Fury fight. With the Tyson Fury fight, I don't think he knew what to expect. And I think he, was very thrown off by Tyson Fury's ability to move and his size and reach. With Anthony Joshua, especially after that Tyson Fury fight, you can say that this was actually a better version of Vladimir Klitschko than it was the one that fought Tyson Fury. And a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, but hear me out. Vladimir Klitschko, when you take a look at the majority of the fighters that he was used to fighting, when it comes down to the overall, no one that he is used to fighting like a Tyson Fury. There's no opponents there. But when he fought a Tyson Fury, that prepared him a little bit more for an Anthony Joshua. So this is a wiser Vladimir Klitschko. This is a wiser Vladimir Klitschko. This is one overall that's prepared a little bit more for an Anthony Joshua who's 6'6" and has an 80-something inch reach because he just faced a fighter of very similar physical dimensions. So this is a very prepared Vladimir Klitschko, a very hungry Vladimir Klitschko. And I remember in the 4th round, Anthony Joshua knocks him down. When it comes down to the overall, and I believe Anthony Joshua obviously wins that round. I believe he knocks him down in the 4th, and I'm like, oh, this fight's going to be over. I remember thinking that the fight's going to be over. I said, Vladimir Klitschko doesn't have that great of a chin. He's been knocked down multiple times in the past. Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, is more skilled than Vladimir Klitschko. And let me tell you something, I still stick to that to this day. I do believe that Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury are both more skilled fighters than Vladimir Klitschko. And a lot of people would disagree with that, and that's okay. But that's just my opinion on the situation. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this. I believe it was the 5th round, or maybe it was the same round. I can't remember. I do remember this fight somewhat clearly, but I can't remember all the details, so I apologize. But I think it was the next round. I think it was in round 5. And you can tell Anthony Joshua exerted a little bit of energy from trying to knock Vladimir Klitschko out. Because I think he knocked him down once in the 4th round. Maybe knocked him down again, but I don't think so. I think he knocked him down only once when it came down to the overall. And then in the 5th round, Vladimir Klitschko lands a right hand. and, lands right on Anthony Joshua. It doesn't appear to hurt Anthony Joshua that bad, the first one. But me and my father were watching it, and we're like, well, oof, you better watch out because Vladimir Klitschko, he punches real hard. Anthony's starting to get hit by a little bit more shots. So we can tell Anthony, we're saying, well, maybe Anthony's getting a little bit more tired. Maybe overall he's getting a little bit more tired. Maybe overall he doesn't have the conditioning. This popped up in the Brazil fight. Can he last? He can't run out of energy against Vladimir Klitschko. He has to pull this off. And I remember this was either in the 5th or the 6th round. I can't remember. Vladimir Klitschko lands another very great right hand. And this one just freezes Anthony Joshua in place. I remember it. It looked like one of those movie scenes where someone all of a sudden just gets frozen. Like one of those superhero movies, and like they just got frozen by like Mr. Freeze or something like that. It lands and Anthony Joshua is frozen for a second in like a weird awkward position, and then he stumbles down to the ground. And Anthony Joshua's trying to laugh it off. He's trying to smile, but this dude is in serious shit. Like when it comes down to it over, this dude is in very, very deep trouble. And at that moment, I honestly thought that Anthony Joshua was done. I thought that he's going to lose this overall, all that hype behind him. He just can't handle the elite fighters. He just can't handle that. He doesn't have the conditioning overall, and he just doesn't have the movement. And Anthony kept getting hit by the right hand and the left hook multiple times. A couple rounds after that, Vladimir was starting to come back in the fight. Anthony Joshua had dominated the first, I believe, 4 rounds of that fight it was. But round 5 onwards, at least I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Vladimir was starting to come back in that fight, man. And it wasn't until about round 8, round 9, where Anthony Joshua was starting to come back and overall was, making it a little bit closer. I think Anthony Joshua won like maybe 1 round out of like, those 4 rounds between like round, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I think he won maybe one of those rounds. Then maybe round 10 he won. I can't remember. But it was close, man. Going into those final 2 rounds, it was close. This was a 50-50 fight, really heading into it. And that's why I say Anthony Joshua, for these people saying that he's extremely chinny, or that overall Anthony Joshua, doesn't have that good of a chin, that's why I say you guys don't know what you're talking about. And now that's not what I'm not saying that Anthony Joshua has a granite chin. But to say that a guy that, because let me tell you this, I've heard stories of this. Freddie Roach, who is a very renowned boxing trainer. Freddie Roach is a person that said Vladimir Klitschko hits harder than Mike Tyson. That's how hard Vladimir Klitschko hits. That's what he said. And I believe him when it comes down to it overall. Anthony Joshua was able to take multiple punches from Vladimir Klitschko that whole entire fight. Dr. Steel Hammer. And he was able to basically take punches throughout the whole entire fight. And he was able to stand up and survive it. Somehow, by some means. And Vladimir Klitschko kind of looked like he stepped off the gas a little bit, so I kind of blame this on him a little bit. But Anthony Joshua was starting to defend the punches better. He was starting to stick his jab out there a little bit more. And something just deep down in him, dug up and said, you know what, I'm not going to lose this fight. And then the 11th round comes. They both get into a clinch. Anthony Joshua, wham, lands this great uppercut. Klitschko looks like one of those, God, what's that one game where the 2 robots box each other and then one of the head pops up? I can't remember. That's what Vladimir Klitschko looked like. And wham. Anthony Joshua lands this hell of an uppercut. And Vladimir Klitschko, he's kind of dancing backwards overall, trying to pretend that it didn't hurt him. We all know it did. Anthony Joshua knocks him down overall, and I said, wow, here he goes. He needs to take advantage of this. Because we don't know what the scorecards are going to be like, and Klitschko could come back at any moment. And then I believe he knocks him down again. He traps him in the corner, pummels him, and then I think he even knocks him down again. And I believe the referee for that fight was Tony Weeks, and Tony Weeks stops it. And I said, wow, Anthony Joshua just had the fight of his life. And he was lucky to escape that fight. And he didn't escape it unscathed. He was very much scathed in that fight. That was a hell of a fight. The best heavyweight fight, I think, of the past 5 years. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this. Anthony Joshua came out very fortunate in that fight that he was on the winning side of that. Because had that been, possibly another fighter, or a Deontay Wilder or a Tyson Fury, who knows, he could have got stopped in that fight. Which is why I think that it was actually good that in his 19th fight. Now, Vladimir Klitschko, I think, overall, was still probably the number one contender in the world at this time. He probably would have not been considered on Tyson Fury's level had Tyson Fury been still boxing. But Vladimir Klitschko was looked at as the best possible opponent that Anthony Joshua could have had. So, once again, he deserves a hell of a lot of credit for this win. This is not me trying to degrade his win whatsoever, but Klitschko did step off the gas a little bit. And I do think that it was good for Anthony Joshua in this fight that he dug deep down and saw that he could really, come back and win the fight in, dire situations, and that he needed to make adjustments. So anyways, that was a hell of a fight, and he ends up winning another belt. Off of that, won the vacant WBA and IBO heavyweight titles, when it came down to the overall, as it says right there. So that was a hell of a fight. And at that point, most people pretty much agreed Anthony Joshua was the best heavyweight in the world. And I don't care what anybody says, Deontay Wilder does not have a win on his resume that is as good as that Vladimir Klitschko win. It is what it is. People can try to degrade that win all they want to. That's a good, legit win. It is what it is. So his next fight comes against Carlos Takam. And Carlos Takam, once again, I can bring you up all this shit saying that he's this elite fighter. Carlos Takam is a very decent fighter. And he's a top 15 to top 20 guy. But this guy's overall not a top 10 guy. Now, a lot of people disputed the knockout on this one. I actually thought the knockout came in the last round, but perhaps I'm wrong about this. Maybe it did come in the 10th round, and I'd have to take a look at that on BoxingRec.com. Well, I don't know if they actually tell you what rounds the knockout happened on BoxingRec.com, but anyway. But, this, I think Anthony Joshua was outboxing Carlos Takam for the majority of the fight. This is one of those ones that I kind of missed. But from the highlights that I've seen overall of it, it did look like Anthony Joshua was winning the fight, but it also did look like he was having troubles. He was not able to hit Carlos Takam as often he was able to hit other fighters, and a lot of people disputed the knockout, and I understand why, because the knockout did not necessarily look, like you could argue that the fight should have not been stopped, when it came down to. So a certain amount of people were then starting to wonder, okay, Anthony Joshua, even though he just had that win over Vladimir Klitschko, what is he going to do against this next guy named Joseph Parker? Now, when I had this channel back then, and I was doing who would win videos, because that's what I used to do. That's how I would attract main subscribers and viewers. A lot of people, especially people from New Zealand, I would have New Zealander viewers on there, which I appreciated very much. Overall, if you're from New Zealand, by the way, that's great. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this, I had a bunch of these New Zealand guys and New Zealand fans tell me that Joseph Parker was going to beat Anthony Joshua, that Anthony Joshua was nothing more than a Frank Bruno, overall, that Anthony Joshua was, a hype job, that he didn't have a chin, and that Joseph Parker was faster than Anthony Joshua, that he was going to beat him and knock him out, and that it was a 50-50 fight. And I always predicted that Anthony Joshua would beat Joseph Parker quite dominantly. And I remember watching this fight. It was live on Showtime, I believe. I believe it was Showtime. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But when it comes down to the overall, I remember watching this fight. And I remember Anthony Joshua, he did look very uncomfortable in this fight. Now, overall, and there's really not a whole lot to say about this fight because it wasn't necessarily the most entertaining. Joseph Parker, I think, tried to get some punches in there, but I just don't think that he was brave enough to try and go in there and try to knock Anthony Joshua out. There was a couple people that said that Anthony Joshua got hurt in this fight. I never really seen a moment in the fight where Anthony Joshua got that badly hurt when it came down to the overall. Anthony Joshua was pretty much using his jab. I think he could have used a little bit more, but Anthony obviously was a little bit uncomfortable. And this is what this is what I mean when I say Anthony Joshua is not like a Deontay Wilder, to where he has as much problems with people of his own same physical dimensions. He has problems more with people that are the shorter, speedier guys that can get on the inside, when it comes down to the overall. And this was the first, maybe not the exact first example. This Carlos Takam might have been, but Joseph Parker was the one who really exposed this, when it came down to the overall. But either way, Anthony Joshua ends up outboxing him. I think it was pretty much a 9 rounds to 3 fight. A lot of people disagree. You even have some people out there that think Joseph Parker won. I call those people delusional. It is what it is. Either way, Anthony Joshua now has 3 to 4 belts around his waist, depending on whatever ones you want to count. He now has won the WBO heavyweight title, and that's within his first 21 fights. Tyson Fury, within his first 21 fights, was not fighting the competition that Anthony Joshua was fighting. Deontay Wilder, within his first 30-something fights, was not fighting the competition that Anthony Joshua was facing. So, even though you had the fair share of naysayers, You also had a certain amount of people that thought Anthony Joshua was the real deal and that he is the automatic best heavyweight in the world, which at the time he was, and you could still possibly call him the best heavyweight in the world. And in this next fight against Alexander Povetkin, overall, who is a very, very good contender and always has been, this is another one of those competitive fights. And this is another one of those fights where I think it proves that Anthony's main troubles come against fighters that are the shorter, speedier fighters that can get on the inside. Because Alexander Povetkin, you can argue, in the first part of it was winning this fight. Alexander Povetkin, for the first couple rounds, you could argue was winning because Anthony Joshua even got stunned a couple times in this fight. And Alexander Povetkin is a very hard puncher. And Anthony was getting hit way too much in this fight. I remember overall in the first couple of rounds, Anthony Joshua was getting hit by left hooks. That's one of Alexander Povetkin's main punches. I remember him getting hit with a left hook on the inside, it backing up Anthony Joshua, him stunning, kind of stumbling on his back feet, when it came down to the overall. He was getting hurt a little bit in this fight, and he was getting countered multiple times by Alexander Povetkin on the inside. Some people would even argue that Alexander Povetkin was winning that fight before Anthony Joshua knocked him out. Now, in the 7th round, I believe he knocks him down. I believe he hits him with a right cross. Maybe it was an uppercut. I can't remember. I can't remember overall what he knocks him out with, but he ends up knocking him down once. Hurts him real bad, I think with like a right uppercut or a right cross. I believe it was a right cross, but correct me if I'm wrong. Ends up hurting him real bad, and Alexander Povetkin eventually goes down. He gets back up. Anthony Joshua just goes in for the kill. Hits him, I believe, with another right hand, whether it be an uppercut or a right cross, I can't remember. Knocks down Alexander Povetkin to the floor again. It's called off. And I think overall that, that was the right stoppage. So people are impressed with Anthony Joshua, but a certain amount of people overall are not impressed with him. And I get it, because this was not necessarily an A-class performance by Anthony Joshua. So then you have this next fight against Andrew Ruiz Jr. Now, a lot of people may not remember this fight was not supposed to be against Andrew Ruiz Jr. This was supposed to be against Jarrell Big Baby Miller. And there was even press conferences for the Jarrell Miller versus Anthony Joshua fight. But Jarrell Miller, unfortunately, even to this day, just cannot stay off the PEDs. So Andrew Ruiz Jr. was a late replacement. And I'm looking at this guy, and me and my father, we decided to watch highlights of him, because we always like to watch highlights of fighters that are upcoming against the great fighters that we don't really know. And I've seen Andy Ruiz in a couple of fights, at this time. And I think that he's a decent fighter. But I think Anthony Joshua is just going to destroy him. We see him in the Joseph Parker fight. Overall, we watch highlights of that. And one thing my father does say is that this guy has a really good left hook. This guy has a very good left hook. He's very snappy with it. He has a very good left hook. He times it very good. He could possibly give Anthony Joshua problems on the inside if he's not, worried about it. I'm like, yeah, maybe. But I wasn't overly impressed. And the first couple rounds of this fight, I remember I thought Anthony Joshua was winning. Now, a certain amount of people debated that Andrew Ruiz was winning. I thought Anthony Joshua, from what I remember, because I've only watched this fight once. I can't remember, how I actually remember the first rounds going. But I haven't watched them again, so I, may have to judge them a little bit more accurately. I don't know. Because watching a fight one time and watching it multiple times, you judge it differently. But when it comes down to it, I remember the first couple rounds, I thought Anthony Joshua was winning. And the third round then comes along, and he he ends up landing a hell of a right uppercut on the inside. Knocks Andrew Ruiz to the floor, and you can tell the way Andrew Ruiz looks up, he's like, wow, this dude has real power. And I'm like, oh, it's over. It's done. And then Anthony Joshua goes on the inside again. You can tell that he's trying to get Andrew Ruiz out of there. Overall, Andrew Ruiz, stays, comfortable on the inside. Overall, he stays... what's the word that I'm looking for? He stays calm. He weathers the storm. And when it comes down to the overall, then he lands a left hook of his own. He lands one. The first one I don't think really does a whole lot. The second one that he lands, Anthony Joshua stumbles. And I'm like, oh, Anthony Joshua might be hurt here. Let's see what happens. And then I remember what my father said. He has that left hook. And Anthony Joshua, I remember in the Alexander Povetkin fight, Anthony Joshua is susceptible to getting hit to left hooks. And eventually he stumbles down and he gets knocked down. And I'm like, wow, what the hell just happened? He needs to get the hell up, and overall he needs to take this dude out, when it comes down to the overall. So he gets back up, and I believe he survives for the rest of the third round. Fourth round comes along. And I don't remember, but Andrew Ruiz is starting to take over this fight. And I can't remember if he knocks him down again in the 4th round, but the point being is this. For the rest of this fight, Anthony Joshua got his ass fucking whooped. Anthony Joshua got so badly beaten in this fight. And you had all the Deontay Wilder fans just took a chunk out of Anthony Joshua once he lost to Andrew Ruiz. Oh my, he was never cut from the same cloth as Deontay Wilder. Oh, he was this coward avoiding Deontay Wilder, And Deontay Wilder, of course, took his opportunity as well because that's just his true character. And that was a sign for me that Deontay Wilder was always afraid of Anthony Joshua as well. And a certain amount of people would disagree. But whenever a fighter usually tears down a fighter after a loss, that usually means, especially if they're in the same division, that usually means they were afraid of that fighter. Like when Lomachenko recently lost, and you have Mikey Garcia who just tore down Lomachenko. You know why that was? Because he was afraid of Lomachenko. But it is what it is. But, when it comes down to it over, and Mikey Garcia has also tore down Crawford a certain amount of times because he never wanted to face Crawford either. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this. So that fight happens, and he just completely gets his ass whooped in the final rounds of that fight. Upset of the year when it comes down to the overall. And people going into this rematch, they think that Andrew Ruiz is going to win again when it comes down to the overall. A lot of people thought Andrew Ruiz was going to win again. And going into this second fight, this rematch that was about to happen. And I remember the Deontay Wilder fans overall. It's so funny that now that Deontay Wilder has this alleged clause that apparently hasn't expired. And I'm not sure, if it has or hasn't. I thought at one point in time maybe it has, but maybe I'm incorrect about that. But the bottom line is this, when it comes down to the overall, there are so many Deontay Wilder fans that are just like, oh, Anthony Joshua doesn't even deserve a rematch against Andrew Ruiz. They just need to, have the unification fight with Deontay Wilder and Andrew Ruiz. But they had all these excuses when Deontay Wilder turned down the DAZN deal for Anthony Joshua and all this other shit. But when it comes down to the overall, so the rematch ends up happening. And Anthony Joshua is going to have to make major adjustments here. All right, now the fight's not happening in America this time. It's happening in Saudi Arabia. Anthony Joshua has the right to dictate that. He's the A side. It is what it is. And it's in a rematch clause. So what is Anthony Joshua going to do here? How is he going to look? So Anthony Joshua in this fight, well, he looked in better condition. Because that is one thing I noticed about Anthony Joshua in the first fight. I thought that he was a little bit more flabby. I thought overall that he was not in elite condition. His stamina looked off. And, many people overall say he has a glass chin because, we'll take a look at the Andrew Ruiz fight. Well, when you're not in supreme condition as a fighter, you're not going to take punches as well. So once again, I don't think it's fair to say that he has a glass chin. But when it comes down to the overall, I think it is fair to say that Anthony Joshua not only has had stamina issues in the past, but he was not in elite condition in this fight. Because he did not take Andrew Ruiz very seriously at all in the first fight. He thought that he was this chubby little monkey, and he thought overall that he was just going to knock this dude the hell out. It is what it is. So the second fight, what I notice immediately is that Anthony Joshua is doing a lot what Terence Crawford did in a certain amount of his fights. And what does the Latino fan base always usually say? Or what does the fan base, always usually say, when a fighter is moving around and their fighter's not able to catch them? Oh, he's running. Oh, this is a boring fight. He's running. That's usually, especially what the Latino fan base says, when their fighter cannot catch a fighter or cut off the ring. And that's the first thing that I noticed that Anthony Joshua was doing. He was doing something very similar to what Terence Crawford was doing to Victor Postol when they fought. He was moving from side to side. He was always moving at different angles. He was never staying in one place. And it was throwing Andrew Ruiz off. He could not keep up with Anthony Joshua. He was not able to really hit him. He was able to hit him with a couple of jabs here and there, a couple of body shots here and there, but really nothing major. And Anthony Joshua was able to use his reach, his height advantage. In the first round on, I noticed that he lost some of that muscle mass, which I thought was a good idea to help him get up some energy and, some of that stamina, when it comes down to the overall. So he ends up boxing and moving around him, lands a very good right hand at the end of that first round, cuts Andrew Ruiz. And I said, Anthony Joshua looks very, very good so far. Second round comes along, Anthony Joshua wins. The third round comes along, Anthony Joshua wins. The fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. I think Anthony Joshua's basically won all these rounds. And I said, if Anthony keeps doing this, he's going to win the fight. But he's got to consistently do this. Let's see if his stamina wears out. His stamina never wore out in the fight because he lost some of that muscle mass. He took his conditioning seriously this time. And even some of the punches Then Andrew Ruiz landed on the inside. Overall, when it came down to it, they were not able to hurt Anthony Joshua that much because Anthony was in good condition this time. So he looked very good in that fight. He was sticking and moving. He was moving from different angles. I thought he looked very good. A certain amount of people, of course, were not impressed by the performance because he had a lot of casuals going into this fight, not only hoping for Andrew Ruiz's victory and Anthony Joshua's downfall, but when it comes down to the overall, you had a certain amount of them that were expecting fireworks. If you know anything about boxing, you know that an ass whooping like that, Anthony Joshua was not going to come in here and try to knock this dude out. Overall, he was going to try and just stay there, stick and move. Overall, most likely take the safe route, and there's no problem with that. It is what it is. But I thought he looked very impressive in that fight, and it's because of that loss to where I think it has led to his best performance to date, and this is against Kubrat Pulev. Now, Kubrat Pulev, when you take a look at him, overall, let's take a look at who he's beaten lately. Kubrat Pulev, 39 years old. Many people overall love to make the excuse, oh, Kubrat Pulev is old. He's still a very decent fighter at this point in time. At least he beat Hughie Fury and Derek Chisora. Those are at least two people that I know. But Kubrat Pulev really has never impressed me all that much. I mean, he's defeated some guys over that you can say are decent. I'm not going to really say that he has any overly elite wins, though. I mean, he has a win over Kevin Johnson, he has a win over Derek Chisora, and he has a win over Hughie Fury, but none of those guys are really A-class fighters. It is what it is. But to me, to date, this is the most impressive performance of Anthony Joshua's career. I didn't see Anthony Joshua lose a single round. Kubrat Pulev is a very decent fighter. He's not an overly great fighter, but he's a decent fighter. He's a very decently fast fighter. Decent jab, hard punches. A lot of people thought that Kubrat Pulev was going to go in there and that if he touches Anthony Joshua in the chin once, that he was going to knock out Anthony Joshua. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. Because once again, Anthony Joshua does not have this glass chin that many people overall think that, thinks that he has when it comes down to it. And I seen this fight, and I thought Anthony Joshua was very thoroughly impressive. His jab was out there. His head movement was better than I have ever seen it. His left hand was up the whole entire time to block, his right hand was up the whole entire time to block those left hooks. I barely seen him get hit with anything in this fight, and even the punches that he did get hit with, he was able to take very, very well. I remember the third round, he hurt, Kubrat Pulev. I, in all honesty, thought the fight was going to be stopped when it came down to the overall because he turned around, and usually when a fighter turns around, that means that overall they're going to quit or that they know that the referee is going to stop it, Then afterwards, Anthony Joshua still kept outboxing him. I thought he got a little bit too wild here and there, keeping his hands down a little bit. When he is throwing those combinations, he kind of does it for a little bit too long or is not as defensively responsible as I would like him to be. But maybe overall, he just did that against Kubrat Pulev because he felt he could get away with that against Pulev, and maybe he won't do it against others. I don't know. But when it comes down to the overall, later on, he's outboxing him every round. I thought maybe his stamina looked a little bit questionable in the middle rounds, but it never looked so questionable, in that fight as it did maybe before. So he was in very good condition in this fight. He was able to take the punches well. He stuck his jab out there. He was able to go to the body and the head a certain amount. Great variety in his punches. Great head movement in this fight by him. Great counter-punching ability. Ninth round comes in, lands a great uppercut. He was trying to land that right uppercut for the whole entire fight, basically, or ever since, round 4 onwards. And overall, Anthony Joshua lands that uppercut again. Snaps his head up when it comes down to it, hurts Kubrat Pulev, ends up knocking him down. Kubrat Pulev gets back up, lands a wicked right hand from hell, and Anthony Joshua ends up knocking out Kubrat Pulev. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what led, in my opinion, to Anthony Joshua's most impressive performance to date. And I think the story of Anthony Joshua is a very great one so far because that loss to Andrew Ruiz Jr., and that's something overall that you can look at it three-dimensionally. When you take a loss and whatever it is or something bad happens, you have to take a look at it and see how to turn it into a positive. And that's exactly what Anthony Joshua did. And that's the difference between an Anthony Joshua type of character and a Deontay Wilder type of character. Because what did Deontay Wilder do? It is what it is. He made excuses. He overall said that Tyson Fury cheated and all this other stuff. Anthony Joshua turned it around and he made his career come out to the better. He came out on top, and overall I think he became a more skilled fighter because of it. But that's my little story on Anthony Joshua. I just thought that I would review his career. I think he has turned out to be a very great fighter, and we'll see overall what happens with him in the future. I've always supported Anthony Joshua. He is one of my favorite fighters to watch. Now, once again, that doesn't mean I'm a fanboy of any of these fighters. But I do root for Anthony Joshua because I think he is a great talent, and I think he's a very decent guy. So we'll see what happens with this man later on. But that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.